I never thought I'd see her again, certainly not bleeding under the ruins of the house she took from me. My son stood behind me, waiting to see what kind of man his father really was. She looked up, eyes full of panic, whispering, "Please, I can fix it." And in that moment, I had to decide whether I still believed in decency or just payback. The scream hit me like a blade through fog, sharp, sudden, and impossible to ignore. I was in my workshop sanding the same cabinet for the third straight day, trying not to think about everything I'd lost. The air smelled of cedar, varnish, and regret. Then came another scream, faint but clear, from the condemned house next door, the one that used to be ours before Adrian Caldwell's company bulldozed the neighborhood. My son, Lucas, looked up from his homework. "Dad, did you hear that?" I was already reaching for my toolbox. "Stay here." He didn't listen, of course. 12 years old and determined to prove he wasn't a kid anymore. By the time I stepped outside, he was right behind me, barefoot on the cold dirt. The old place was collapsing in slow motion, year by year. Windows gone, walls split with mold and vines, and that smell of rot that clings to anything left behind. I pushed through the front door, flashlight in hand, dust swirling through the beam like smoke. Then I heard her, a voice I'd know anywhere. "Help! I'm trapped. Please." Under the fallen staircase, half buried in splintered boards and plaster, lay a woman in a blood-stained suit. Her blonde hair was matted with dirt, and her eyes were wide with panic. I froze. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Adrian Caldwell, the same woman whose signature had erased 50 families from this block, mine included. "Please," she gasped, struggling to move. "I can fix it. I can pay. I can." Her words died when she saw my face. Recognition hit her like the pain she'd caused. I could have walked away. Every part of me wanted to. But then I felt Lucas's presence behind me, small, silent, watching. And I knew this moment would define what kind of man my son believed I was. I set down the toolbox and knelt beside her. "Where are you hurt?" "My legs. I can't move them." The central beam had snapped clean through, crushing her from the knee down. "Lucas," I said, keeping my voice steady, "hand me the crowbar." He hesitated. "Dad, that's her. I know who she is. Now do it." He obeyed. Together, we wedged the crowbar beneath the beam. The wood groaned, shifting under the weight. "On 3, I said. 1, 2. The third count came with a scream that scraped my spine raw. Adrienne's legs came free, twisted and bleeding. I dropped the beam and grabbed her under the arms while Lucas pulled from behind. Outside, under gray morning light, she gasped like a drowning woman. I called 911, but before the dispatcher even picked up, headlights flashed across the street. A black SUV stopped hard at the curb. 3 men stepped out, dressed in tailored suits that didn't fit the neighborhood. The tallest one, gray hair, scarred down his cheek, looked straight at Adrian and smiled without warmth. "Well," he said, "look who decided to fall from her throne." Adrienne's face went pale. "Preston, please." I moved between them, pushing Lucas behind me. "Ambulance is on the way," I told the dispatcher, rattling off the address. "Possible fracture. Internal bleeding. Send police." Preston laughed, low, bitter. "Police won't help her. My brother spent 5 years in prison because she needed a scapegoat. He hung himself last month." Adrienne's voice cracked. "Preston, I didn't." "You did." He cut her off, eyes burning. "And now you're going to feel what that costs." He reached into his jacket. I shoved Lucas back toward our yard. "Run. Don't look back." My boy froze for half a second, then bolted. I faced Preston alone. "You'll have to go through me first." He frowned. "She destroyed your house. Why protect her?" I didn't have a clean answer. My hands shook, but I stood firm. "Because my son's watching. And because somebody has to stop the chain before it kills the next person." Sirens echoed in the distance. Preston's jaw tightened. He lowered the gun slowly. "This isn't over," he muttered before turning away. The SUV peeled off just as the ambulance pulled up. Paramedics lifted Adrienne onto a stretcher, cutting away her ruined pant leg. She looked at me once, dazed, eyes full of confusion and shame. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't answer, just stood there, covered in dust, watching the ambulance drive away. Lucas appeared at my side, small hand slipping into mine. "You saved her," he said quietly. I shook my head. "No, son. I just stopped her from dying." He looked up at me, puzzled. Isn't that the same thing? I exhaled, staring at the ruins of what used to be our home. Not even close. 3 days after the ambulance lights faded, I was back in my shop pretending the world made sense if I kept sanding. Cedar and varnish hung in the air. Lucas was quiet in the corner with his homework, pencil tapping like a slow clock. I'd almost convinced myself the whole thing with Adrian was a strange dream when a soft knock hit the door. She came in on crutches, left leg in a cast, dressed in jeans and a plain blouse that looked borrowed from someone with a simpler life. No makeup, no armor, just a face that had finally met its reflection. "If you're here to say thank you," I told her. "Save it. Consider it said." "I'm not here to thank you," she said, easing onto a stool. "I'm here because I need something I can't buy." That line should have made me laugh. A billionaire needing something she couldn't purchase at scale. But nothing about her posture felt staged. She traced the dovetail edge of a drawer with a fingertip like she was reading Braille. "I did the things people said I did," she said quietly. "Bribes, forged documents, shifting blame onto someone who didn't deserve it. I optimized profit and forgot people existed. When the paramedics asked who to call for me, I had no one. I don't know how to be a person anymore. Russell, I want you to teach me." "Teach you what exactly?" I asked. "How to say sorry without choking. How to see what I've refused to see. How to make a decision that isn't measured in quarterly gains. How to live in a way your son can respect." I almost told her to leave. My mouth even opened for it. But then I remembered the bridge I'd stood on one bad night, wondering what would happen if I just slipped over the rail and let the river sort me out. Anger narrows your world until there's only one road left, and it ends in the dark. "I'm not a therapist," I said. "I know. That's why I came. You're the one person who had every reason to leave me under that staircase and didn't. You made a choice based on something bigger than hate. I want to learn whatever that was." Before I could answer, Lucas walked in from the kitchen, a glass of water in his hand. He froze. The look on his face was a storm front. Hurt, fury, disbelief. "No," he said, setting the glass down like it might shatter. "Absolutely not." "Dad, are you serious?" "I haven't decided anything," I said. "You don't need to decide. She's the reason Mom left. She's the reason everyone at school jokes about us living in a shoebox. And now you want to help her?" The words landed where my ribs used to be. He wasn't wrong. The wrecking ball didn't hit just the house. It took our lives with it. Adrian didn't defend herself. She didn't reach for a checkbook. She just stared at the floor like she finally learned how to keep her mouth shut. "Lucas," I said, "you're allowed to hate her. I hate what she did too. But I'm thinking about something else." "Like what?" "Being her friend. Like not letting anger own the last piece of me it doesn't already have." He shook his head and stormed down the hall, doors slamming hard enough to rattle the clamps on my bench. Adrian shifted, winced, then looked up at me. "I can leave." "You're going to," I said, "right after I say one thing. If I do this, and I'm not saying I will, it won't be for you. It'll be for my son and for the man I'm trying to be in front of him. I won't take your money. I won't sign an NDA. The minute this harms Lucas, you're gone." Her eyes softened, and for once I couldn't see the CO calculating outcomes. "Understood." I walked her to the door and stopped. "If I change my mind, you'll hear from me. Don't come back unless I invite you." She nodded and limped out into the afternoon light. The shop felt too quiet afterward, like the air had been holding its breath. I stood outside Lucas's door and knocked. "Go away," came the muffled answer. "Not doing that, buddy," I said, walking in. He was face down on the bed, arms folded under his forehead like he wanted to punch the pillow but didn't trust himself to stop. I sat on the edge of the mattress and let the silence do some work. "You're right to be angry," I said at last. "What happened to us wasn't fair. I let the anger run my life for a long time, and it cost me your mother and most of who I used to be. I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm not even there myself." "Then why help her?" he asked without looking up. "Because I'm tired of building with rage. It makes everything crooked. Maybe this is me trying to prove to both of us that I can choose something else." He rolled over, eyes red and stubborn. "So this is about you feeling better?" "Partly," I said, because he deserved the truth. "And partly because I want you to see that we have choices even when we've been hurt. We can stay mad forever, or we can try to understand how people break and maybe how they change. What if she's lying? Then we'll know soon enough, and all we'll have lost is time. If it's too much, we stop. No speeches, no guilt. You say the word, and it ends. Deal." He stared at me, wrestling it down. Deal, he said finally, voice flat. I went back to the shop, stared at the phone for a full minute, and typed a message I could feel in my bones the second I sent it. Tomorrow, 7 a.m., wear work clothes. Don't touch anything unless I say so. I didn't get a reply, which was probably the best answer. The next morning, I unlocked the shop early and laid out the day like a lesson plan I never meant to write. Safety glasses on the bench, a broom by the door, a plank of oak marked with pencil lines for Mrs. Peterson's bookshelf, the one for her late husband's history collection. At exactly 7, the knock came. Adrian stepped in, took a long look around, and breathed like a person coming up from deep water. First rule, I said, handing her the glasses. Ask before you touch anything. Half the tools in here want your fingers as souvenirs. She smiled, quick and nervous. Understood. I fed the oak into the table saw and let the room fill with the clean sound of a straight cut. Sawdust rose like snow. She watched closely, not speaking, while I explained why the grain matters and why machines can be fast, but not always right. When I shut the saw off, she finally said, I built an empire by making everything faster. Maybe that's how you lost the part that wasn't for sale, I said. She nodded, and for the first time, I believed she might actually be here to learn. Okay, I said, tapping the broom with my boot. Lesson 1 starts simple. Sweep every square foot of this place like someone's going to judge you by how you leave it. Because someone will. She gripped the broom like a pen she wasn't qualified to hold, then started pushing sawdust into clean lines. I turned back to the oak, set my plane, and tried to listen for the sound of my life coming back into tune. By the second morning, the smell of sawdust already clung to her clothes. Adrian showed up on time, as promised, still moving stiffly on that mending leg, but refusing to complain. She looked around the shop like it was a foreign world where gravity worked differently, where power came not from money, but from patience and skill. I handed her a rag and pointed at the oak boards lined up on the bench. If you're going to be here, you'll earn your air. Wipe down everything after each cut. She nodded, wordless, and got to work. For a while, the only sound was the rhythm of the hand plane gliding over wood, that long, even whisper that still manages to calm me when nothing else can. I focused on the grain, shaping edges smooth, pretending she wasn't there. But she watched, absorbing everything. Finally, she broke the silence. You could make more money doing this faster. Mass production, automated routing, less waste. Why insist on hand tools? Because faster isn't better, I said. Mrs. Peterson ordered this bookshelf to hold her husband's war history collection. He spent 40 years teaching history at the high school. He deserves something built with attention, not pressed in a factory. Adrian ran her fingers over the curve of the wood, tracing the pattern. The grain, how it flows, you align them deliberately. Every board has a story, I said. You have to listen before you cut. Machines don't listen. She nodded quietly. For the first time, there was no argument, no boardroom rebuttal hiding behind her eyes. When we stopped for water, she finally spoke again. I spent 20 years optimizing numbers, maximizing return, minimizing cost. Every decision reduced people to line items. We called it efficiency. I looked at her hard. You mean you called it erasing consequences? Her jaw tightened. At the time, it made perfect sense. If the numbers worked, the project moved forward. I didn't think about the humans behind them. I set my cup down and felt the old anger rise like something waiting its turn. We weren't numbers. We were neighbors. You'd see us in the grocery store, me, Rebecca, Lucas in the cart, and you didn't even blink. You could have stopped it with one decision, one moment of seeing us as people. You're right, she said softly. Don't apologize, I snapped. Sorry means nothing if you don't understand what you're sorry for. You can't fix what you refuse to feel. She looked at the floor. Then teach me that. You don't need teaching. You need unlearning. You trained yourself not to see suffering because it slowed your progress. You shut it out so you could sleep at night. I hesitated, staring at the floorboards. You want to know if we were fine after you wiped out our neighborhood? We weren't. My wife fell apart. My son started waking up screaming. I drowned it with whiskey until I almost drove into a bridge one night. That's what your numbers did. They didn't just erase houses, they erased lives. Tears pooled in her eyes, but I didn't stop. You can't fix that with money, or guilt, or a PR campaign. Some things just break, and you live with the pieces. She whispered, then what am I supposed to do? Carry it, I said. Every day? Don't hide from it. Let it hurt. Maybe that pain keeps you from destroying anyone else. We stood there, the hum of the shop replacing the words we didn't know how to say. Finally, she nodded. Then I'll carry it, however long it takes. I believed her, not because she sounded convincing, but because for the first time she sounded human. 1 month, I said. That's all you get. You'll come here every morning. You'll work. You'll listen. And if Lucas says he can't handle it, it ends right then. His peace matters more than your redemption. Her voice didn't waver. Understood. That first week was brutal. She swept sawdust, wiped benches, fetched tools she couldn't name. I barely spoke, but I noticed the effort, how she never asked for breaks even when her leg trembled, how she studied my hands like they held the formula for decency. By Friday, she'd learned to sand properly. Mrs. Peterson came by to pick up her finished bookshelf, tears in her eyes when she saw it. Harold would have loved this, she said. He always said you could tell a man's character by what he built with his hands. After she left, Adrian turned to me. Why didn't you charge her full price? You're behind on rent, aren't you? Because she's a widow on a fixed income, I said. And her husband was a good man. But you need the money. Yeah, I said, but not enough to sell my values for it. She shook her head. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to. It just has to be right. She looked at me for a long time before saying, maybe this is what I was trying to buy all those years, the peace that comes from knowing you're right, even when it costs you. I picked up another board, brushing away sawdust. Lesson 2, I said. Some things aren't measured in dollars. They're measured in how well you can sleep at night. Monday at 7 sharp, the knock came again. I expected the usual, crutches, careful steps, stubborn jaw. Instead, Adrian looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days and was holding a thick envelope to her chest like it might bite. I brought something, she said. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and nodded to the bench. She set the envelope down and slid it toward me. Inside were pages, names, addresses, dates, little notes scrawled in the margins. I felt the weight before I read a single line. What is this? Faces behind the numbers, she said. 10 years of projects. Every family displaced by my decisions. I found as many as I could. Her voice thinned. 732. I didn't touch the stack at first. It just sat there between us like a cinder block. She stared at the floor. I stared at the names. Finally, I pulled the first page free. Handwriting. Crossed out addresses. Asterisks and arrows. Besides some names, she'd written a single word. Struggling. Next to a few. Moved on. And 3 lines carried the same note. Small and brutal. Deceased. Suicide. The shop went quiet in a new way, like the air had climbed onto the bench and was reading with me. How long did this take? I asked. All weekend, she said. And it's still incomplete. People disappear when you push them hard enough. I set the pages down and pressed my palm flat on them like they might blow away. Why bring this here? Because you said I never looked, she answered. So I'm looking. And I needed you to know I'm not going to stop pretending these were just relocations on a spreadsheet. They were lives, and I drew the line through them. Anger rose, then stalled. There's a difference between someone saying sorry and someone dragging the ledger of their sins into the light and forcing themselves to read it aloud. This looked like the second one. This is going to break you, I said. Good, she replied, meeting my eyes. Maybe that's what should happen. I didn't have anything wise to add, so I handed her a sheet of 120 grit and taught her how to read the swirl marks she was leaving behind. We worked in silence, and the envelope sat there between us like a second apprentice. Around lunch, Lucas came home early. He saw the papers and frowned. What's that? History, I said. The kind most people try to forget. He slid a page free, scanning with a kid's quickness until the words hit. She wrote them all down? She did, I said. He looked at Adrian, and for once the anger in his face softened into something else. Not forgiveness. Curiosity, maybe. What are you going to do with it? I don't know yet, she said honestly. But I needed to know their names. If I carry anything forward, it starts with them. Lucas studied her a second longer, then set the page back exactly where he'd found it. Names matter, he muttered, and grabbed a sandwich from the fridge. When he left, I picked up the hand plane and worked the edge of a cherry board until the curl of shavings came off thin and translucent. Bearing witness matters, I said. Even when you can't fix what you broke, refusing to look away matters. She nodded, sanding again, slower now, as if each pass needed to earn its place. That afternoon, I showed her how to square a carcass with winding sticks and why you don't rush glue. She watched like the work itself might be the language she couldn't speak yet. When I clamped the case together and checked the diagonals, she asked, "How do you know when it's right?" "You don't," I said. "You check and you recheck, and if it's off, you correct it. Then you live with the tiny flaws that won't ruin the piece." She glanced at the envelope. "What if the flaws aren't tiny? Then you stop pretending they are." She wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist, leaving a pale streak through sawdust. I kept telling myself we were improving neighborhoods. I used words like revitalization to sleep at night. "And what do you call it now?" She swallowed. "Removal. Displacement. Harm." I didn't congratulate her for the vocabulary. Words don't build houses, but they can stop you from knocking one down. Before she left, she slid the envelope closer to me. "Keep it here," she said. "I don't want it disappearing into a drawer at my condo when it gets hard to look at." "You sure?" "Yes," she said, and her voice didn't shake. "Hard belongs out in the open." After she limped out, I stood alone with the list and the smell of glue setting in the clamps. I turned off the lights, then back on again, like that might change what was written. It didn't. Lucas wandered in later, hands in his sweatshirt pocket. He nodded at the envelope. "You think she means it?" "I think she's past the point of pretty speeches," I said. "That's worth more than I thought I'd see." He leaned against the bench. "What happens next?" "Next," I answered, sliding the bookshelf carcass a hair to center. "Next we keep working. And if she's serious, the world's going to find out with her." He nodded once, the way he does when he files something under, "We'll see." Then he picked up the broom, and we cleaned the floor together in long, even strokes, two people making space for whatever was coming through the door tomorrow. It was midweek when the past came knocking again, this time without warning. Adrian and I were cutting maple planks for a new commission when a shadow filled the doorway. I looked up and saw Preston Hartley, the same man who'd pointed a gun at her that night in the ruins. Only this time, he came alone. "I heard something interesting," he said, stepping into the shop like he owned the air. "The great Adrian Caldwell is working in a carpenter's shed." Thought I'd see if it was true. The hair rose on my arms. Adrienne's knuckles whitened on the workbench, but she didn't back away. "Preston," she said quietly. "What do you want?" "An apology," he said. "A real one. Not the PR garbage your lawyers wrote." I put down the saw and moved slightly between them. The memory of his gun wasn't far behind my ribs. "You don't need to do this here," I said. "Maybe I do," he replied. "You had your say. Now it's my turn." Adrienne's voice trembled but didn't break. "You're right," she said. "You deserve that." Preston folded his arms. "Then say it." She swallowed, and for a long moment, silence filled the space between the whir of the fan and the smell of cut wood. When she spoke again, it wasn't rehearsed. It came raw, heavy, human. "Your brother's name was Andrew," she began. "He was 32 when I framed him. He trusted me. He helped me cover up financial fraud, and when the investigation closed in, I made him the scapegoat. I doctored documents, bribed auditors, let him rot in prison for crimes I committed. He served 5 years for me, and when shame took the rest, he hung himself. I told myself it was the cost of doing business. I told myself I had no choice. But the truth is, I chose myself over his life." Her hands shook as she wiped her face. "I can't give you back your brother, or the years he lost, or what that did to your family. But I see it now. I see the man I turned into. And I will carry that for the rest of my life." Preston's jaw worked like he was chewing gravel. His eyes glistened, but he didn't move. "You think that makes it better?" "No," she said. "Nothing makes it better. But acknowledging it matters. Not hiding matters." He stared at her for a long time, his fury burning down into something colder, quieter. "My niece is 12 now," he said finally. "Melissa. She thinks her father was a thief. Are you planning to tell her the truth?" Adrian went pale. "If I do, I'll be admitting to crimes that could still ruin me." "There it is," he said, bitterness creeping back in. "Still protecting yourself." She closed her eyes. "You're right. But I'm done hiding. I'll tell her. I'll tell the world. He deserves that." "When?" Preston asked. "Give me 2 weeks. I need to prepare, not legally, but emotionally, to look that child in the eye and tell her what I did." "Your word means nothing to me," he said. "I know," she whispered. "But it's all I have left." Preston looked between us, then finally gave a single, reluctant nod. 2 weeks. If you haven't done it by then, I'll do it for you. The press will know everything. When he left, the door slammed hard enough to shake the window panes. Adrian sagged onto a stool, trembling. I handed her a bottle of water. You okay? She shook her head. No. I'm terrified. Not of losing the company or the money. I'm terrified of looking into that little girl's eyes and seeing what I took from her. Sometimes, I said, being human means doing the thing that terrifies you, because it's the right thing. What if I can't? She whispered. Then you can't, I said. But I don't think that's you anymore. She stared at me like she wanted to believe it. Why are you helping me? Really? I leaned on the workbench and exhaled. 3 years ago, I stood on a bridge at 2 in the morning, wondering if jumping would solve more problems than living. The only thing that stopped me was Lucas. I was drowning in hate. Helping you. It's me proving to myself that I'm capable of more than rage. That grace isn't weakness. She blinked, eyes wet. Grace, she repeated. I don't think anyone's ever given me that before. Maybe because you never gave them the chance, I said. You built walls so high no one could reach you, and then blamed the world for the silence. She gave a small, broken laugh. And now I'm tearing them down one nail at a time. Yeah, I said, picking up my chisel again. And it's supposed to hurt. For a while, we worked without words, the air thick with sawdust and truth. The list of 732 names lay open on the bench beside us, and for the first time, she didn't flinch when her eyes drifted to it. 2 weeks arrived faster than either of us wanted. I cleared the bench that morning like the shop itself needed room to breathe. Lucas was already there, pretending to sharpen pencils while keeping an eye on the door. He'd asked to be present. Said he needed to see if people really follow through. When the knock came, it was careful, almost polite. Preston stepped in first, shoulders tight, a hand resting lightly on the back of a thin girl with dark hair and steady eyes. Melissa, 12 years old, but you could tell she'd had to be older for a while. Adrian stood up so fast her stool scraped the floor. No suit today, just jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back, face unguarded. For once, she didn't try to control the room. She just faced a child and set down everything except the truth. Hi, Melissa, she said, voice small. My name is Adrian Caldwell. I know who you are. The girl answered, not rude, just factual. We pulled up stools in a rough circle. No podiums, no microphones. Just 4 adults and 1 kid, with the list of families on the bench like a witness that couldn't be bribed. Lucas took a seat near the vice, eyes moving between Adrian and Melissa like he was measuring the cut. Adrian didn't open with a speech. She opened with a name. Your father's name was Andrew, she said. He worked for me. He trusted me. And I betrayed that trust. Melissa's hands clenched in her lap, knuckles whitening. She didn't blink. I committed fraud, Adrian continued. When investigators got close, I panicked and made your father the scapegoat. I changed documents. I bribed people. I let him go to prison for my crimes. He served 5 years. After he got out, he couldn't live with what people thought of him. He died because I cared more about protecting my company than telling the truth. No theatrics. No excuses. Just the cut, made slow and straight. I told you your father was a criminal, Adrian said, voice breaking. That was a lie. He was a good man who made one mistake, trusting me. I'm sorry doesn't cover it, and I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm here to give you back the truth of who your father was. Silence pressed on the rafters. Preston stared at the floor, jaw locked. Lucas shifted, then went still. Melissa finally spoke. Why didn't you tell the truth then? Adrian swallowed. Because I was a coward who wanted to win. Because I'd spent so long treating people like obstacles that I forgot they were people. The girl looked at Preston. Is it true? He nodded, eyes wet. It's true, honey. Melissa turned back to Adrian. I missed him every day, she said. I thought he chose stealing over me. He didn't, Adrian whispered. He chose protecting your family, and I used that loyalty to save myself. That's on me. All of it. Melissa stood to leave, then stopped at the door and looked back. Are you going to jail? I don't know, Adrian said. Statute of limitations means maybe not. But I'm going to tell everyone what I did anyway. The board, the press, the regulators, anyone who will listen. I won't hide this again. That won't bring him back, Melissa said. No, Adrian answered. Nothing will. But I hope it helps you hold your head up when someone lies about him. I hope it gives you the truth he deserved. The girl nodded once, small, decisive, and left with Preston. The door closed softly. The room stayed heavy. Adrian didn't move for a long time. Her hands were in her lap, palms up, like a person waiting for a sentence. I slid a bottle of water across the bench. She didn't take it. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, she said. It'll be harder tomorrow, I said. When you say it on camera. When your board tries to piece you back together into something palatable. I know. She finally took the water, held it without drinking. But I also know what I have to do. Lucas spoke from the vise, voice steady. I needed to see that, he said. Not the words. The part where you didn't run. Adrian looked at him like he'd just handed her back a piece of air. Thank you, she said, meaning it. He didn't smile. I don't forgive you. But if you show up tomorrow and tell the truth in front of everyone, I'll stop calling you a coward in my head. That's fair, she said, almost smiling. I'll learn better words later. I checked the clamps on a carcass like it mattered. Maybe it did. Sometimes the hands need work when the heart is working through its own. What happens after the press conference? I asked. I lose, she said simply. My job. My name. Whatever money isn't swallowed by lawsuits. Maybe my freedom, if there's a charge left to file. But I'll keep telling the truth until there's nothing else to say. Why? Lucas asked. Adrian met his eyes. Because your dad taught me there's a difference between stopping someone from dying and saving a life. One is immediate. The other takes everything you have for as long as it takes. We cleaned the bench in quiet, each of us moving carefully, like noise might break the thin bridge we were standing on. Before she left, Adrian placed both hands flat on the list of families. Tomorrow, she said. No lawyers. No script. I'm going to say their names out loud, and then I'm going to say mine. She looked at me. Will you be there? Yeah, I said. Someone should witness it. Lucas nodded. I'm coming too. I need to know people can change. Adrian swallowed and gave a single grateful nod. Then she left, taking nothing with her except the choice she'd made. After the door shut, Lucas stood beside me at the bench. We didn't say much. We just sanded in long, even strokes until the wood felt like something you could trust your weight to. Imperfect, honest, strong enough to hold. The next morning broke gray and cold, the kind of day when the world feels like it's waiting to see who'll flinch first. Adrian stood at the front of her corporate headquarters, facing a sea of cameras, microphones, and men in $1,000 suits who used to answer her calls on the first ring. Lucas and I stayed at the back of the crowd, just two faces among dozens. She wasn't dressed for the stage this time. No power blazer, no diamond watch, no armor. Just jeans, a plain blouse, and that cast still clinging to her leg like a reminder of how she got here. I'd seen her practice her breathing that morning, but she didn't have notes in her hand. That alone made me believe she meant every word she was about to say. Good morning, she began, her voice shaking only slightly. My name is Adrian Caldwell. Until today, I was the CEO of Caldwell Development Corporation. For 20 years, I've built a business that I called Progress. In reality, I built an empire on broken foundations, the homes, reputations, and lives of others. And I am here to tell the truth. The cameras clicked like insects. Reporters leaned forward, waiting for blood. She didn't disappoint them. Adrian named the fraud, the bribes, the falsified documents, the zoning corruption that wiped out 50 families from one neighborhood alone. She spoke the name of Andrew Hartley, the man she'd framed, and told the world how he'd died carrying her crimes. She gave dates, proof, names of accomplices. There was no PR filter, no safe phrasing. It was confession, not spin. Halfway through, one of her board members stood up, red-faced. Adrian, stop. This isn't authorized. She didn't even glance at him. You're right, she said. It's not authorized. It's overdue. The crowd erupted. Microphones pushed forward. Questions fired like gunshots. Are you resigning? Will you face charges? Is this a strategy for redemption? Adrian raised her voice over the chaos. This is not a strategy. It's accountability. You don't buy forgiveness with donations. You earn it, if you ever can, by telling the truth even when it destroys you. Security arrived soon after, flanking her as she finished. By the time they escorted her off stage, the place looked like a crime scene. Cameras flashing, lawyers shouting, news anchors speaking into microphones about the fall of an empire. Lucas turned to me. Do you think she really changed? I thought about the woman I'd found trapped under a staircase, the one who said she could fix anything with money. I thought about the nights she came to the workshop covered in sawdust and sweat, learning to use her hands instead of her influence. Yeah, I said. Not completely. Nobody changes overnight. But she's different enough to matter. He looked up at me. What happens to her now? Probably nothing good, I said. She'll lose her company, her money, maybe her freedom. But for the first time, she'll be able to look in the mirror and see a person instead of a brand. We watched as the building's glass doors closed behind her. Reporters kept shouting, but Adrienne didn't look back. Later that night, she showed up at my shop again. She looked smaller somehow, not weak, just stripped of everything unnecessary. They fired me, she said. Unanimous vote. The board's suing. The SEC's investigating. I'll probably be bankrupt within the year. I leaned against the workbench. How do you feel? She laughed softly, without bitterness. Terrified. Relieved. Free. I spent 20 years climbing a mountain that was really just a landfill. Now it's gone, and I'm finally breathing clean air. She ran her fingers across the scarred surface of the bench. Can I still come here sometimes? Not to work, just to remember what matters. I shrugged. You don't need my permission. But if you're coming here, you'd better sweep. She smiled, small, tired, real. Fair enough. Lucas came in from the back, wiping his hands on a rag. You could help me with something, he said. I've been thinking about those 732 families. We should do something for them. Adrienne blinked. What do you mean? He pulled out a notebook. Some need housing, some job training, some just someone to care. You've got connections, even without your company. We could build something new out of what's left. Adrienne looked at him, tears rising fast. You'd help me after everything? I'm not doing it for you, he said. I'm doing it because they deserve it. And because my dad taught me that grace isn't about who deserves it, it's about who needs it. I swallowed hard. Then that's what we'll do, I said. We can't undo what's been done, but we can build something better. Adrienne nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'll liquidate what I have left. We'll start tomorrow. For the first time since I'd met her, I believed she meant it. The days that followed were strangely quiet. News outlets chewed through Adrienne's confession like wolves fighting over the same carcass, but the noise never made it past my workshop door. Inside, life slowed back down to the rhythm of wood against steel, planing, sanding, shaping. The sound of a man, a woman, and a boy trying to rebuild something the world had already declared broken. Adrienne kept showing up. No headlines, no guards, no cars waiting outside. She'd sweep, wipe down tools, sometimes just sit on the stool by the window, watching the light crawl across the floorboards. She didn't talk about the lawsuits or the investigations. She talked about the people she wanted to help next, the 732 names still waiting for their turn to matter again. Lucas took charge like it was his calling. He made spreadsheets, sent emails, tracked addresses from the list she'd built. We can't fix everything, he'd say, but we can try one family at a time. Adrienne let him lead. She never argued, never tried to manage him like an employee. It was the first time I saw her take direction without needing control. I built furniture for the families they found. Tables, desks, cribs, small things that turned a space back into a home. Adrienne funded temporary housing, job programs, even partnered with a few nonprofits to get people back on their feet. None of it was glamorous, but it was honest. One afternoon, Preston brought Melissa back to the shop. The girl had grown more confident, still quiet, but with a steadier way of standing. Adrienne froze when she saw her, unsure if she was welcome. Melissa looked her in the eye and said, I don't forgive you. Maybe I never will. But I'm glad you told the truth. It helps knowing my dad wasn't what they said he was. Adrienne nodded, voice caught in her throat. That's more than I deserve. Thank you for saying it anyway. They left soon after, but the air stayed charged, like something sacred had passed through. Weeks turned into months. Adrienne's wealth evaporated through settlements and donations, but she didn't flinch. She sold her mansion, moved into a modest rental nearby, and kept working from the same stool. The woman who once measured her worth by stock prices now measured it by hours spent in service of someone else's peace. One evening, I found her sitting at the bench with the list spread out in front of her, pencil marks next to each family she'd managed to help. 43 names were crossed out. 789 remained. This'll take decades, she said softly, and it'll still never be enough. I leaned beside her, watching the shavings curl off my plane. No, it won't. But it's something. Sometimes something is all we can offer. She smiled faintly, tears catching in the corner of her eyes. You saved my life, Russell. Not in that house, here. You taught me what money couldn't buy. I shook my head. No, you saved yourself. I just gave you a place to remember what being human feels like. Still, she reached for my hand, not as a woman asking forgiveness, but as a person reaching across the line she'd once drawn between worth and wealth. Then thank you for holding that space, she said. Before I could answer, Lucas came in carrying a stack of cut boards. We've got another order, he said. A family in Riverton. Dad lost his tools in the fire. We're building him a new workbench. Adrian stood, wiped her eyes, and smiled. Let's get to it. We worked side by side until the sun dipped low. Sawdust floated in the light like gold dust, settling over everything. The boards, the benches, the scars we all carried. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was work done right, with care and intention. And in that little workshop, surrounded by the ghosts of everything we'd lost, it felt enough like peace to keep going.